Hello, students. Welcome to Scale Up University. Welcome to this course on Anatomy 101. So, this is the module 1, lecture 1 of the course. And in this lecture, we will be discussing why the human body fascinates us. So, this is the lecture why the human body fascinates us. So, module 1 is the building blocks of anatomy and physiology. So in module 1, we'll be discussing the building blocks of anatomy and physiology. And this is the lecture 1 of the module 1. And it's like an introduction. Here we will be discussing why the human body fascinates us. So before learning what the human body is made of, we must understand why has the human body fascinated humans across time, cultures, and civilizations. Like if we look at into the history of the human evolution, we can see some good evidences wherein we saw how the early humans, the humans of Stone Age, they were fascinated by the human body. So why has the human body fascinated humans across time, cultures, and civilizations? And it's not like just the humans of Stone Age got fascinated with the human body. Even the humans of this century, even we are fascinated by the human body. And when I talk about fascinated by the human body, I am talking about like the composition of the human body, like the structure of it, the way it is made of, and how it works. And also, we should understand why anatomy remains one of the most important sciences today. Like, anatomy is something which has been evolving from the early Stone Age, and why it is still considered as one of the most important sciences. So that also we should understand. Then that is what we'll try to decode in this lecture. So if we look into the topics covered in this lecture, so first we'll discuss early human fascination with the human body. Then we'll talk about early anatomical awareness, when we'll discuss about caves, cave drawings, and hieroglyphs. Then we'll discuss evolution of anatomical understanding over history. Like we'll discuss the evolution of anatomical history. Evolution of anatomical understanding over the period of time, over history. Then we'll talk about the explosion of anatomical knowledge in the last 20 years. Then we'll discuss why does anatomy remain central to science and medicine. And the last topic for this lecture will be the human body as complex machinery. So these are the topics we will be looking at in this lecture. One by one, we will be looking at all these topics. So it will be an interesting lecture. So let us start with the first topic, that is early human fascination with the body. So basically, if we talk about fascination with the human body, it is not modern, but it is as old as human itself. So long before microscopes, textbooks, or even laboratories existed, early humans, they started observing, they observed injuries and healings. Because see, early humans also they got injured and they got healed also. So they started observing those phenomena. They witnessed birth, they witnessed illness, they also witnessed aging because they saw some of their colleagues, they started aging, and even they aged. and they also saw the death. So all these things, all these observations, they fascinated, like they created a fascination for human body among early humans. Early humans, they noticed that different body parts had different roles to play, and they tried to explain pain, movement, and consciousness. Now, the curiosity among the early humans, it was not academic, because early humans had nothing to do with academics, but it was mainly survival driven. So, this curiosity was survival driven. So, this curiosity was not academic but survival driven. Understanding wound, understanding wounds, it implied or it meant survival in hunting and warfare. Understanding illness, it meant protecting the tribe. Because see, once they understood the illness, then automatically they got the cure of it and they were able to protect the tribe. And understanding reproduction, it implied or it ensured continuity of life. So basically, we saw that early humans had a curiosity which was survival driven, wherein they observed injuries and healings. They witnessed birth, illness, aging, and death. They noticed that different body parts had different role to play, and they tried to explain the concepts of pain, movement, and consciousness. They understood wounds, and it helped in the survival in hunting and warfare. They understood illness, like they tried to understand illness, which helped them in protecting the tribe, and they tried to understand reproduction, which enabled the continuity of life. Okay, now we'll look at the next topic of this lecture, that is early anatomical awareness. So there are evidences of early anatomical awareness. So like we have evidences in the form of cave drawings. So there are cave drawings. Some of the earliest cave paintings, it depicts human figures, animals with emphasized organs, and there are cave paintings which even depicts injuries, wounds, and movement. And these cave paintings, they depict early anatomical awareness among early human beings. So these drawings suggest that early humans, so they recognized internal structure even without formal anatomy, because at that time there was no concept of anatomy at all, because we are talking about stone age, 10,000 years ago, or even older than that, maybe 30,000 years ago or 1 lakh year ago. Because human evolution, if you talk about 5 million years ago, so we have traces found in Africa, because the origin of humans, so that's in Africa. So early humans, they recognized internal structures even without formal anatomy. They understood that bodies had components with functions, and early humans, they associated certain body parts with strength, vulnerability, and life. So early humans, they recognized internal structures even without formal anatomy. They understood that bodies had components with functions, and they associated certain body parts with strength, vulnerability, and life. So in early anatomical awareness, we'll talk about hieroglyphs and ancient records. So if we talk about ancient civilizations, especially Egyptians, so we saw that they used hieroglyphs to represent organs like heart. Now, what is this hieroglyphs? Let us understand that. So basically, it's an ancient writing style used by the ancient Egyptians to record their history, achievements, stories, and sacred text. So basically, Egyptians, they had their own writing style, which is called as hieroglyphs, and in that they used to record their history, achievements, stories, and sacred texts. And there it was found, like we found some hieroglyphs which is representing organs like heart. So that is an evidence of early anatomical awareness during ancient civilizations. Also, Egyptians, they practiced mummification, and you might be aware of mummification required organ removal. So while removing the organ, they got aware about the organs. They got aware of the anatomy of human body, and they also recognized that organs had distinct roles. So we can say that, see, the ancient civilization, definitely they lacked scientific tools. They did not had scientific tools. They did not had formal education, but still they showed. If we talk about ancient civilization, they showed anatomical awareness. We discussed so many facts which proved the existence of anatomical awareness among the ancient civilizations, among the early humans. They demonstrated functional reasoning, and they demonstrated systemic systematic observation. So they demonstrated systematic observation. Okay, students, now we'll look at the next topic of this lecture, that is evolution of anatomical understanding over history. So if we talk about the early phase, so in the early phase, we saw that humans started observing the human body. So there was observation without explanation. So if we talk about ancient civilizations, if we talk about early humans, the Stone Age, so there was observation without explanation. So bodies were studied externally. Internal processes were explained through myths or spirituality. And disease was often attributed to supernatural causes. So in the early phase, anatomical understanding was just about observation without explanation, wherein early humans, they started observing the phenomena, they started observing the bodies externally, they started studying bodies externally, internal processes, they saw, they observed the internal processes, but they were unable to decode the science behind that. Rather, they explained it via myths, spirituality, and they saw diseases, they saw illness, they saw death, they saw aging, and they attributed it to supernatural causes because they were unable to decode the science behind that. So that was the early phase. Then we had the middle phase, wherein we saw structured observation. So here dissections were there, as we saw in the example of ancient civilization, that is the Egyptian civilization, where mummification, in that removal of organ was needed. So dissections, it was very much limited and it was controversial. In the middle phase, we have evidences of anatomical drawings and labeled structures. And in the middle phase, one of the very interesting thing was the growing distinction between superstition versus or superstition and observation. Like instead of claiming the reason for a phenomena to be a supernatural cause or some mythology, some myth, some spirituality, they started decoding the science behind it. They started observing. So that was something very much interesting about the middle phase, that is the structured observation, wherein humans they did some sort of dissections. It was very limited and it was controversial also. We have evidences of anatomical drawings and label structures during that phase, middle phase, and people they started reasoning, like whatever phenomena they saw, the illness, the aging, the death, the disease, they started to decode the science behind it. They did the observation rather than just blaming some god for the disease or for some supernatural cause. They started observing and decoding the science. Then we have the modern phase, and that is the scientific anatomy, and we are in the modern phase, and in the modern phase anatomy has evolved a lot. So we have development of microscopy. So scientific anatomy is characterized by microscopy. Because of this, we are now like we can zoom into the organs, we can go deep, we can observe the phenomena at cellular level, discovery of cells and tissues, because all the organs are made up of tissues and tissues are made up of cells. So the discovery of cells and tissues was a very big breakthrough in the field of anatomy. So the scientific anatomy, the modern phase, it is characterized by integration of chemistry and biology. And scientific anatomy is about understanding systems rather than isolated organs. So what we can say, like if we want to conclude this, we can say that the evolution of anatomy or evolution of anatomical understanding over history. So anatomy, it progressed from surface level observations to deep structural understanding driven by improvements in scientific tools and methods. So anatomy has progressed from surface level observation to deep structural understanding driven by improvements in scientific tools and methods. So this is the evolution of anatomical understanding over history. Okay, now we'll look at the next topic of this lecture, that is the explosion of knowledge in the last 20 years. So interestingly, whatever major advancements we have seen in the field of anatomy, that we have seen in the past 2 decades, like last 20 years, we have seen some very significant developments in the field of anatomy. Like whatever major significant progress we have seen in the field of anatomy, that is the last 20 years. And why is it so? Let us understand that. Why the recent acceleration? So in last 20 years, we got advanced imaging techniques like MRI, CT scan, molecular imaging. In the last 20 years, we saw some breakthroughs in cellular and molecular biology. In last 20 years, we saw the emergence of computational model, computational modeling of biological systems. And we also saw the integration of genetics, chemistry, and physiology. So what this means? So this advancement and these recent discoveries, breakthroughs. Now see, anatomy has evolved a lot. Now anatomy is not just about naming part. Anatomy is no longer just naming parts. Rather, it is about processes. Anatomy is about processes. Anatomy is about interactions. And anatomy is about systems. Modern medicines depends on understanding function at the cellular level. Now, basically, modern medicine is about functioning at the molecular biology level, like cellular level, molecular level. And this acceleration of anatomy, it makes it more powerful. It makes anatomy more powerful. It makes anatomy more complex. And it makes anatomy more essential than ever. So we saw that how anatomy evolved with the time and how in the last 20 years it took a completely new form. Okay, now we'll discuss the next topic of this lecture, that is why does anatomy remain central to science and medicine. So see, anatomy is essential because every medical diagnosis relies on structural knowledge. Every treatment targets a physical structure. Every physiological function depends on anatomy. So that's why anatomy is very important. It's very essential. If we talk about the fields that depend on anatomy, so they include medicine and surgery, nursing and allied health, sports science and rehabilitation, biomedical research, forensics and anthropology. So we saw so many fields that depend on anatomy. So we can say that anatomy and physiology are the language of human body. Without understanding anatomy and physiology, understanding disease or health is impossible. So that's why anatomy remains central to science and medicine. Because if we have to understand disease or health, understanding anatomy is the key. It's essential. It's mandatory. Okay, now we'll look at the next topic of this lecture, that is the human body as complex machinery. So first let us try to understand the meaning of this statement. What does this mean? When I say human body as complex machinery, so if we talk about the human body, it has components. And what are the components? So we have cells, basic unit of life. Cells together with they make tissues, and tissues make organs. So if we talk about human body, they have components. So the basic component is cells. Collection of cells will make tissues. Collection of tissues will make organs. Each component has a specific role. These components they work together simultaneously. A failure in one part affects the entire system, because that's the beauty of a system. Because any system you take your mobile phone, if any component it fails, mobile phone it stops operating. You take a fan, if any one component gets failed, it's gone. Similarly, human body is a system. It contains components. Every component has a specific role to play, like cells, tissues, organs. They work together simultaneously. There's a synchronicity is there. But if one component fails, failure in one part, it will affect the whole system. Now, human body is different from machine. So here, though, we saw some similarity, like how a human body, we can compare it with a machine. But if we talk about differences, unlike machines, human body has got some specific properties, like the body repairs itself. So there is a concept of healing. The human body, it adapts to stress. See, the idea is that now, like let us suppose if you get an injury, after some time automatically it will get healed. It will repair itself. But machine, if a machine gets a scratch or any dent it gets, or any scratch, or if it gets tear down, it will not repair automatically. But the human body can repair itself. Human body can adapt to stress. Machines, they have limitations. They cannot adapt to stress. Human body, it learns to evolve. It learns to evolve. Human bodies can operate continuously without shutdown. So these are like some very unique features of human body which makes it different from machines. So now we got a clear understanding that we can compare the human body with a complex machinery, wherein we saw that human body is made up of components, the basic components like cells, tissues and organs, and every component has a role to play. They work in coordination, they work in simultaneously, and if one part fails, the entire system gets collapsed, like it gets failed. And hence we can say that our human body, it's a very sophisticated system. It is one of the most sophisticated systems known. So we can say that human body is one of the most sophisticated systems known. That's the human body. So we can say human body as complex machinery. So students, finally we completed this lecture. So if we want to conclude it, we saw that human fascination with the human body is not a new thing, but it is rather a very old thing. Even ancient civilization and early humans in the Stone Age, they got fascinated with the human body because they observed phenomena like illness, aging, disease, death. It made them curious. We saw early humans showed real anatomical awareness. There are evidences in the form of cave drawings, and that Egyptian civilization example we saw, hieroglyphs. So there we saw some like heart drawings. We saw the evolution of anatomy. Anatomy evolved from observation, because in the early phase it was purely observation, and in the modern phase it was purely scientific discipline. So the evolution of anatomy is characterized by observation to scientific discipline. And we saw that how in the last 20 years anatomy saw massive growth, massive disruption, and anatomy remains the foundation of all medical sciences. And we saw the human body as complex machinery, wherein the human body functions as an integrated complex system. So I hope you got a very good understanding of this lecture. So do subscribe to our YouTube channel, Scale Up University. Share this lecture with your friends. Share it in your circle. If you have something to discuss with me, you can drop in a comment. So thanks for watching. Thanks for your time.